Hi everybody, it's Nikki here and welcome to a Bookish Friday video. So today's video is going to be my 2020 wrap up and statistics video. So it's where I go through the number of books I read, all the statistics that I took every month. I have now accumulated them all together into one yearly statistic, and then we have some kind of awards, I kind of want to say, but they're not, because there's no trophy or anything to take home for any of these books or authors. But yeah, that is what we're going to do. I did the same thing last year, back at the beginning of 2020 for books that I read in 2019. I will try and link that for you in the description box down below. So if you're interested in how I felt about books I read in 2019, you can go ahead and watch that one as well as this one. So all year I did keep a reading journal. It's a very thick reading journal now, but at the back I have written my end of 20 I have written my end of 2020 the wrap up and statistics. So let's get started. So the total number of books that I read was 196. I managed to hit my reading goal. Weird number, 196, but that's how many squares was on my reading journal, so that's what my number was set at. It was touch and go for a while there at the end of December, but I did manage to squeeze in those last few books and hit my Goodreads goal. I have reduced my Goodreads goal for 2021. I've set it at 100. I know that in my 2021 goals video, I said I was going to set it at 150. I'm still going to aim for about 150 in 2021, but I've put my Goodreads goal at 100 just so I don't stress myself out, she says, having 19 books on her TBR for January. So yeah, I did manage to read my goal of 196 books in 2020. The total number of pages that I read, and this number does differ from the number that Goodreads give me, because on Goodreads you can't always find the exact edition of book that you've read sometimes. So sometimes I have to go for an edition that has near to the amount that I have but isn't the exact amount of pages. And also sometimes when I've read an audiobook, I put it down as a physical page book on Goodreads, because that's what Goodreads counts. So this number does differ to the number of pages that Goodreads tells me I read, but Goodreads doesn't tell me how many audio hours I read, so I do. So total number of pages I read after all of that was 54,278 pages. That's of physical books that I read. The average number of pages per book then equals to 277. Now that shocks me a little bit, because the majority of books I read are kind of like 300 to 400 pages. However, I have took that total number of pages and divided it by the 196 books that I read, but those 54,278 pages only equates to the physical amount of books I read. So maybe my math should have been, bear with me, we're going to do some calculations. So 54,278, and we're going to divide that by the number of books, physical books that I read. That makes more sense. Okay, so the average number of pages per book that I read was approximately 359 pages. And that is dividing that total number of pages by the total number of physical books that I read. So yeah, that makes more sense. The total number of audiobook hours that I listened to was a whopping 255 hours and 6 minutes. That equates to 10 days and 15 hours and 6 minutes worth of audiobooks that I listened to. That is phenomenal. That shows me that I'm definitely using my Scribd subscription, that I'm listening to audiobooks on my library BorrowBox app. So I'm very, very happy with that number. Okay, onto my star ratings. So I had 0 1-star ratings this year, in 2020. I am so happy that there was no books that I gave a 1 star to. Maybe I wasn't feeling mean this year, I don't know. There was 18 2-star books, 71 3-star books, 68 4-star books, and 39 5-star books. So the average star rating that I gave was a 3.7. So basically 3 stars was what I gave the majority of the books that I read. Now, there were 2 books that I DNF'd this year and 2 books that I left unfinished, but I still plan to read them in the future. They are my Dark Vanessa and the Murders at White House Farm. Those were 2 books that I was struggling to get through, but I was still interested in reading them. So I've put them down as unfinished rather than DNFs, just because I feel like I want to get back to them at some point in the future. Okay, on to genres. No surprises, I read 88 fantasy sci-fi books. I read 47 middle grade books, probably helped by the Believeathon. We had 2 rounds of the Believeathon in 2020, so 2 whole months that were dedicated to middle grade books has really helped that number jump. I read 6 thrillers, so I obviously wasn't in a very thriller kind of mood. I read 15 contemporaries, which surprises me because I always think of myself as more of a thriller reader than a contemporary reader, but apparently I'm not. I read 11 classics. I am so happy with this number. That equates to almost 1 a month. And I am so happy about that because that's really good. For me, that's really, really good. I read 20 graphic novels, mangas, and I read 9 non-fictions, which is brilliant. 9 non-fictions, mainly helped by the fact that I try to read my non-fictions by audiobooks because that really helps me to get through them. So yeah, moving on to genders. I read 56 books by male authors, 138 books by female authors, which is amazing. And then I read 2 books by other genders, so by non-binary authors. Now, there may be more non-binary authors that I just haven't realised. So that is something I'm going to keep an eye on more in 2021. I want to really, instead of just assuming that the author's name is a male name, I'm going to check what gender the author identifies at, because some people may have a female name or a male name, but they might actually see themselves as non-binary. So I'm going to keep an eye on that one. That is something that I want to be more aware of going into 2021. The origin of the books that I read, 138 were books that I physically owned on my shelves, and 58 were books that I borrowed from either the library or my Scribd audiobook subscription, or from BorrowBox, which is my library's app. Now, I will say that obviously the pandemic of COVID-19 has obviously had a massive impact on my lending from my local library. However, obviously I was still able to lend books through BorrowBox Library and through Scribd, so that number really dropped sort of when the pandemic really hit and the country went into lockdown. Morning, Dylan. So yeah, that's where that number has gone down. The format of the books that I read, 151 were physical books, which meant that I held the physical book in my hand and I read it. I read 34 via audiobooks, so listened to them. And I read 11 ebooks this year in 2020. I am so happy with that. Again, it is almost one a month. Now I do want to increase that number in 2021. I want to really start using my Kindle Unlimited subscription more and to be downloading more books on my Kindle rather than purchasing physical books, because as you can see, my bookshelves are really cramped now and I'm running out of space. So I want to make sure that the books that I am bringing into my collection are ones that I want to keep and admire for long periods to come. Whereas books that I'm sort of interested in, I'm going to try and purchase the ebook or lend through the library. So yeah, I need to increase my ebook reading in the future. And the binding of the physical books that I read, 53 of those were hardbacks and 98 were paperbacks. Now, if you were to ask me which is my preference, I do prefer a paperback. I find that after a while, reading a hardback can become heavy and I get pain in my wrists holding on to a hardback. However, there are some times when a hardback is just easier to read, especially if you have a tightly bound paperback. They can be really hard to open. So yeah, it's kind of like, I like a floppy paperback. That's my preferred choice. But yeah. So let's go on to the awards, basically. So the first award goes to the longest book that I read, and that would go to Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J. Maas. This is the eighth. This is the 8th book in the Throne of Glass series. I didn't read this copy. I read a copy that I loaned from my local library, and it was after I read that book that I went out and I went and purchased the whole box set of these books, because I absolutely fell in love with this series through reading it through my local library, that I decided I needed to have the box set to keep so I can reread it whenever I so wish. Yes, I love this. This book broke me, and it is the longest book that I read this year at a total of 980 pages. So yeah, very big, thick book, but so worth it. Cried my eyes out. This book broke me. Definitely my favourite in the whole series, and I do plan on rereading this again in the future. I know that there is a read-along going with the Throne of Glass series again, and I think they're starting with Assassin's Blade in January. However, I have 19 books on my January TBR. I am not sticking another one on there, so I might try and read 2 books from the Throne of Glass series in my February TBR, if I can fit them into my TBR game that I now play. If you're new to my channel, I do a new TBR game called Bookgammon, where I use the game Backgammon to choose my books for the month, and it did me dirty in January. So I might try and catch up with the read-along in February if I can fit the books into my TBR. But if not, I will probably try and fit this series back into my TBR sometime throughout 2021 because I actually miss this world. So yeah, that's the first book. The next award goes to, well, the shortest book, and that would be this one. It is The Christmas Truce by Carol Ann Duffy, illustrated by David Roberts. I just read this at Christmas with my husband. It is the story of how the soldiers from Germany and England stopped fighting on Christmas Day, shared gifts, sang songs, and played a game of football on Christmas Day in 1914. Beautiful story. It is classed actually as a poem. So yeah, I guess I read one poetry book in 2020. And so this has a whopping 37 pages. So if you're after a quick read over Christmas, this would be a perfect book to pick up. Yeah, I really, really love this, and the artwork inside is absolutely stunning. So pretty. So yes, highly recommend. The next award goes to the oldest published that I read, and that would go to Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. And this book is a whopping 301 years old. This was originally written in 1719. Like, not this edition, obviously, but the story was, and it definitely showed in its writing. There is obvious discussion about slavery in here, about a man who, trying to escape his father's office work, goes on a ship, gets shipwrecked on his own on a deserted island, and he has to survive. That's that one. The newest book that I read, the newest published, was one of 3. So I went with the last one that I read out of the 3, and that was The Castle of Tangled Magic by Sophie Anderson. This was published in October, on the 1st of October 2020 here in the UK. And this one was a bit of a mixed bag for me. I absolutely loved the world building in this and the characters that were in this story. However, I felt like it was a bit long-winded, and I really didn't like the decision that was made with the villain in the story. So unfortunately, although this is one of the newest books in my collection that I've read in 2020, I am already thinking of unhauling this because I was deeply, deeply disappointed with this book. Yes, the world building and the character building was wonderful and beautiful. I absolutely loved that. That villain, I just can't forgive the decision that was made with the villain. I didn't like it. It wasn't my choice. It wasn't my preference. So I know a lot of people have loved this. I watched the interview that Gavin from How to Train Your Gavin did with Sophie Anderson, and I thought that Sophie Anderson was a wonderful person. She was so bubbly and so full of fun and enjoyment of life, and I love her as a person, but I just didn't like this book. Well, some of the choices in this book. So that's that one. Now going on to the most popular book that I read. So this is the one, according to Goodreads, that most people have shelved on their Goodreads. And that is, of course, The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. So I started rereading the Hunger Games trilogy in 2020. I actually still have the 3rd and final book to read, The Mockingjay. So I actually only read the first 2 books in the trilogy in 2020. But I read them because I also read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, which was released in 2020. And I wanted to reread the Hunger Games trilogy just to sort of try and remember what these books were. And I loved it. I really, really enjoyed rereading these. And yes, I will be getting to Mockingjay as soon as possible in 2021. So The Hunger Games has been shelved on Goodreads by 8,029,148 other people have shelved this. That's an awful lot of people who have read or want to read The Hunger Games. So yeah, it's my most popular read book. And then the least popular book that I read, so the one that was shelved by the least amount of people on Goodreads, was a middle grade. And it is Don't Tell Him I'm a Mermaid by Laura Kirkpatrick. This is the second book in the series by Laura Kirkpatrick And Then I Turned Into a Mermaid, which is the first book. So this is the story about a young girl who finds out and discovers she's actually a mermaid. So not only is she having to deal with being a teenager, working in her parents' fish and chip shop, and dressing up as a haddock in order to hand out flyers for this fish and chip shop, being targeted by the bullies at school, and fancying a boy at school, but she also has to deal with the fact that she's a mermaid and turns into one every time she's anywhere near some water. So this has been shelved by a whopping 19 people on Goodreads. I am shocked at that, because why is this book not being advertised more? Like, I absolutely love this author. Laura Kirkpatrick is also known as Laura Stevens for her YA books. She goes by Laura Kirkpatrick for her middle grades because she obviously doesn't want children to be reading her YA. So she has two separate writing names that she writes under. But I love her writing. It's so funny. It's so quirky. It's such a fun read. Somebody in the marketing department really needs to start pushing her work, because she's brilliant. She's funny. I loved it. It was such a fun read. So yeah, that is a shame that this one is the least popular. However, this book is also the highest rated on Goodreads. Now, it could just be that because it's only had 19 people shelving it on Goodreads, all 19 have obviously given it a very high rating. I myself gave it 4 stars. And it could just be that obviously the average has worked out, that more people have voted this higher rating and it's given it that high rating. So the average rating for this is 4.89. That's almost 5 stars for this little book that only 19 people have shelved on Goodreads. So I encourage everyone. This is the first book, And Then I Turned Into a Mermaid by Laura Kirkpatrick. This is the second book by her, and Don't Tell Him I'm a Mermaid. So I encourage everybody to go out and pick this book up and give it a read. It's a laugh, it's funny, it's really, really good. And I think there's a lot of little girls out there, and some big girls, like myself, who would thoroughly enjoy this series. I don't know if it's only a duology or if she plans to bring any more books out in this series. But yeah, definitely pick these up and have a read. It's worth it. Okay, on to my lowest rated book. Now, I don't have the physical book of this because this book I actually read as an audiobook, and that was Memory Thief by Lauren Manzi, and this has a Goodreads rating of 3.26. So it's still a fairly decent rating. I think I gave it a 2 or a 3 star, can't quite remember. It is a story about a young girl who is trying to save her mother, who lives trapped in her own memories, and she is being held in a hospital that the authorities are looking to sort of shut down. But that means that her mother will not survive. So she is trying to fight to save her mother and also fight the authorities and things like that. It was a very short audiobook. I think it was only something like 6 or 7 hours. It is a story that I might think about looking to see if I can get a physical copy through the library, because it was a very interesting book, but with it being such a short audiobook, my memory on it is a little bit fuzzy, but the concept sounded really, really interesting to me. So it's something that I might pick up and reread in the future. Moving on to the next award for the prettiest book that I read in 2020, and that has to go to The Binding. Now, I will say that not long after I purchased this copy, about 6 months later, they brought out another edition of this that had purple sprayed edges. Do you know how close I was to purchasing that one? But I didn't. So sadly, mine does not have the purple sprayed edges. I really wish it did. But this is a signed copy from Forbidden Planet. We have this beautiful gold foiling front cover, this beautiful spine, which has a matching spine to Bridget Collins' newest book, which is The Betrayals. So when The Binding and The Betrayals are sat together, they look so nice together because they have matching spines. And then we have the beautiful back as well. But the true beauty in this is these beautiful end papers. So editing Nikki here because apparently I didn't notice that the camera had cut from my original filming. So here to show you The Binding and how beautiful it is. So we saw the front cover and then we were just looking at the inside pages, and then this is the front cover, and then the spine, and then the back. How stunning is that? That's so beautiful. The detail, just beautiful. And that was The Binding. Now, I did receive some beautiful books from Fairy Loot in 2020, but I noticed that I haven't been reading any. So this won the most beautiful book that I read in 2020 award. The award for the ugliest book goes to Lord of the Flies. And this is by William Golding. Now, look at that cover. It's just, I hate it. It's so ugly. I guess it goes with the theme of this book of these group of young boys who are stranded on a deserted island that turn into scavengers and hunters trying to survive until they are discovered. But it's so ugly, and I've tried to find a prettier copy because I really do enjoy this story and I would like to reread it again in the future. But nope, all the copies that I've found look like this. I cannot find a pretty copy of this book anywhere. So if you know of one, please let me know. Put a link in the comments section down below, because no, I don't like this. It's not my aesthetic. I'm not saying this is bad artwork. I think it's fairly decent artwork. It's just not my preferred artwork. So yeah, the award for the ugliest cover goes to this one. But I do enjoy the story. Okay, moving on to the biggest disappointment of the 2020 TBR, and that has got to be, sadly and unfortunately, The Deep by Alma Katsu. And I'll tell you why this was disappointing, because this was advertised as Titanic meets Sirens. And you know me, I love me a mermaid story. And what you might not know about me is I am absolutely fascinated with sunken ships. When I was, okay, fun fact moment. When I was a kid, I hated school holidays. I hated the fact that for 6 weeks out of the year, I had nothing to do. I enjoyed school. I loved having that regularity of somewhere to go every day and something to do. And so when it came to 6 weeks holidays, what I would do is I would pick a subject, go to the library and study that subject all throughout the summer holidays. And then I would write up like an essay, I suppose, on what I learnt. Like I would do like lots of like different little essays on what I learnt. And one of the subjects that I picked one year was sunken ships. So I learnt about the Titanic. I learnt about the Bismarck, the Lusitania, the Mary Rose, the Britannic. I learnt about all of these sunken ships. The Titanic was obviously one that I fell in love with, just the whole story. I love the film, even though it's not historically correct. Even the director of the Titanic now agrees he wasn't historically correct with some of the decisions he made in that film. So when I heard of a story linking the Titanic with sirens, I was so excited. I dropped my whole TBR as soon as I got this book in my hands. I didn't care what I had to read, what I was supposed to read. I wanted to read this. This is not a mermaid book. It does not sit on the shelf with all my other mermaid books. It sits at the bottom, on the bottom shelf, because I'm so disappointed in this story. There is a tiny part of this book that is sirens. Tiny, very tiny. The majority of this book is the story of a young girl who works as a maid on the Titanic, and then later on the Britannic, which is the Titanic's sister ship. But the mermaid part, the siren part of the story, minimal. 5%. I'd say 5% of this book was sirens. Deeply, deeply disappointed. This did not live up to expectations. It was a good book and I enjoyed the story, but it wasn't a mermaid story. It wasn't a siren story. I've kept it on my shelves mainly because I feel like I need to give this a second chance. I need to reread this knowing full well it's not a siren book. It's just a Titanic story. And if I can go in with that knowledge, then I might enjoy it a lot more, because the Titanic element on it was really interesting. And there's a bit of occult sort of thrown in there as well. But yeah, it was deeply disappointing because it was sold as Titanic meets Siren, and it isn't. It's Titanic with a pinch of Siren. So yes, deeply disappointed. My most surprising book was a book that I was supposed to read in 2019, but I kept putting it off because I felt like it might be too emotional for me. And the truth was that actually it wasn't a surprise, because it was way too emotional for me. But I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I didn't think I would like this story. I thought that I would actually get a little bit angry at this story with the way that it's sold or marketed. And that is My Sister's Keeper by Jodi Picoult. And the tagline is, if you use one of your children to save the life of another, are you being a good mother or a very bad one? And it does sort of question the idea of giving birth to a second child in order to be a donor for a firstborn child who has got leukemia. And the second child then spends her life donating bone marrow and body parts to her sister in order to save her sister's life. And the second child ends up taking her parents to court for I can't remember what it is she claims. I actually just watched the film of this today with Cameron Diaz in, and they made some changes in the film to what you read in the book. I prefer the book. I absolutely sobbed my heart out with this book. It broke my heart. I honestly thought that this was going to be a DNF and an unhaul before I even picked it up. I just did not think much to this. The cover of this book is just not pleasing to my eye. The synopsis on the back, I felt like I would get too emotional about it, too angry about it, but I wasn't angry. I was heartbroken, and it just really pulled on my heartstrings, especially as a mother. This really, really did, like, my poor heart. So yeah, this was very surprising because I gave this 5 stars and I love this story. I absolutely love this story. Not sure if I will ever reread it because it was such a heart-wrenching story, but definitely glad I did not DNF or throw this away or unhaul it, because I love this. 5 stars. So that was the most surprising book that I read. So now on to the last 2 awards, and I'm gonna start with the worst one first. So the worst book of 2020 that I read, or technically I didn't read because I DNF'd it halfway through, and that has got to be The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson. This is supposed to be a thriller, and yet I got about halfway through and there was no thriller element in it at all. We had a journalist who had done a report on someone who then claimed that it was all false. So the journalist was prosecuted for slander and got found guilty, so had to go to prison. But yet some rich guy decided to use him to investigate his missing niece. Don't know why he chose a reporter, but anyway, instead of an investigator, I don't know. But then there was an investigating company where there was a young girl working for the company, and she was kind of like a ward of the state or something, and she had this advisor who ended up sexually abusing her. And I was like, so what kind of, pardon, no. Like, I did end up DNFing this because sexual abuse is not something I want to read about. So it was the worst book that I read in 2020. Did not like it at all. I'd say that the worst book that I completed and finished was Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I'm sorry if you're a fan of Pride and Prejudice, but I must be missing something with that book, because I thought I don't know. I must be missing something with Pride and Prejudice, because I found it so rude and so I just, like, you can't make a love story out of a couple where the man literally insults the woman right before he proposes to her. I'm sorry, that's not a love story. No, run away as fast as you can from that bloke. You do not need to be anywhere near a man that puts you down and says you're not good enough for him, but will you marry him anyway? I just run away. So I must be missing something with Pride and Prejudice, because I didn't like it at all. There was also a bit of fat phobia in there that I didn't like. So yes, that was the one book that I did completely read and hated. I didn't like it. I gave it a 2-star. It just wasn't good. But let's end on a high and let's finish with the best book I read in 2020. Now, I have mentioned this book numerous times of me absolutely loving it. And that is Orion Lost by Alistair Chisholm. Now, the story is with this, that I had seen this in Waterstones a few times, but with it being sci-fi, I didn't pick it up because I'm not a fan of sci-fi. Aliens and spaceships and stuff, just not my thing. But I'm quite friendly, as you can imagine, with the staff in my local Waterstones. And I got talking to one of the members of staff, and they said to me, have you read Orion Lost? And I said, no. And they said, well, you don't get many sci-fis in middle grade, so I really suggest you give it a go. It's a really, really great read. So I thought, okay, fine, I'll pick it up. I'll give it a chance. I read this for Believeathon 2, I believe, back early in 2020. And I believe I read this round about May time, I want to say. And May is not a very good mental health month for me. It's a difficult time for me. It's my youngest daughter's birthday in May. And so my mental health takes a bit of a dive around that time. And the message in this book, I just needed to hear it at the time that I was reading it. The message in this book is you are the captain of your own ship. You cannot control the weather and you cannot control the sea around you. But what you can control is how you steer yourself through those stormy waters. And I needed to hear that. I needed to hear that at the time that I read this book. It had such a mental impact on myself that I am determined that when the pandemic crisis is over, I am going to go get a tattoo to commemorate this book. I'm not 100% sure what I want to get yet, but I definitely want a bookish tattoo that will commemorate this book forever on my skin, because I need to never forget this message that this book gave to me. The story itself is really, really interesting. A transport ship called Orion is 4 months out of Earth when catastrophe strikes, leaving the ship and everyone on board stranded in deep space. Suddenly, it's up to 13-year-old Beth and her friends to navigate through treacherous and uncharted territory to reach safety. But a heavily damaged ship, space pirates, a mysterious alien species, and an artificial intelligence that Beth doesn't know she can trust means that getting home has never been so difficult. With incredible twists and turns and an action-packed story, this is a thrilling, unputdownable adventure. And I completely agree. I love this book. I will shout about this book forever and a day because of how much this book means to me. So yeah, this wins my best read of 2020, and it will take a lot to beat it in 2021. So yeah, that is it. That is my bookish stats and awards video for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.